Prior to the Industrial Revolution, people were not able to travel easily, which led to little contact between civilizations. As transportation began to modernize and people began to interact with people of different cultures, wars became more frequent. These frequent wars were characterized by social, political, and economic differences between the opposing forces. Samuel Huntington was a political philosopher who has published an essay entitled Clash of Civilizations in 2001. Believed that a main source of future conflicts would be between groups of different civilizations. However, philosophers such as Edward Said believed that future wars would be based on political and economical conflicts. Said is correct because, while there are many accounts of religious conflict in the past, modern conflicts have become much more driven by political and economic issues. However, Huntington is correct that the majority of recent conflicts have been between groups from different civilizations.
Samuel Huntington explains his political philosophy that civilizations will clash based on their differences. Huntington explains that there are 7 or 8 major civilizations, many of which are delineated by religion. Western civilizations include the United States and Western Europe. Confucian civilization encompasses countries based in Confucianism. Japan has its own civilization. Islamic civilization includes much of the Middle East. Hindu civilization covers the Indian subcontinent. Slavic Orthodox civilization is based in Eastern Europe and Latin America, and African civilizations are based on their respective continents. Due to the differences in civilizations, a significant amount of friction will be created between them. The different groups have differing histories, language, traditions, and religions. Huntington believed the differences in histories, languages, cultures, and traditions are minor contradictions between civilizations, but he believed the most significant differences between the civilizations is religion. Because modern societies are more aware of each other's beliefs, they are more likely to clash. Huntington goes on to explain how economic and social changes are weakening national identities, which means people are more likely to organize around a religion. This will lead to people becoming more religious. Huntington explains recent conflicts between the West and other civilizations by acknowledging that Western countries are relatively powerful and are therefore able to assert their culture into other civilizations. When these civilizations resist Western influence, conflicts erupt. Huntington believed the differences between civilizations will cause the majority of future wars, and that these conflicts will occur between civilizations with different religions.
Edward Said explained that the fallacies in Huntington's argument while asserting his belief that politics and economics are the primary cause of war regardless of civilization. Said believed that Huntington embellishes the role of civilizations in conflict. He uses the example of the terrorist attacks on the United States by Al-Qaeda. The attack was performed by a small group of religious radicals, yet the United States then launched a war on terror focused on the Islamic countries. Even though the group that performed this terrorist attack was a small extremist group, many Americans believe that there is no difference between Muslims and extremists. Those who understand the differences between major religions and are tolerant of those from other cultures recognize that not all Muslims are extremists. However, uneducated people often jump to conclusions that an entire group of religious people are responsible for the actions of one much smaller radical group.
The Persian Gulf War illustrates how conflict was based on economic and political disputes, and while it began as a conflict within the same civilization, it exploded into a conflict between Islam and the West. In 1990, Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein accused the neighboring nation of Kuwait of taking crude oil from the Al Ramallah oil fields located along their common border. Because of this political problem, conflict began, and within a couple of months, it became more violent, and Iraq ultimately invaded Kuwait. Kuwait turned to the United States and other members of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization for support. The U.S. then joined the war to protect Kuwait and their oil fields, not wanting to give more power and resources to Iraq. Within a couple of years, the U.S. had won the war. To make sure Iraq would never rise to power again, Bush demanded that Saddam Hussein step down from power and leave Iraq within 48 hours under threat of war. This shows that the main cause of war was 2 political reasons. First, more that the United States did not want a dictatorship in Iraq, and second, that the UN did not want Iraq to have more political or military power. In response to Bush's request, Hussein refused to step down, and the Second Persian Gulf War, also known as the Iraq War, began 3 days later.
The Soviet Union's invasion of Afghanistan, which was initially caused by the expansion of communism, destabilized Afghanistan and set the stage for inter-civilization conflict, which became the U.S. war in Afghanistan. In 1978, Soviet forces wanted to transform Afghanistan into a communist state. Afghan fighters who did not want a communist government fought the Soviets in a bloody war that lasted several years. The Afghan fighters, or the Mujahideen received support from the United States, which helped them push out the Soviets and prevent communism. While it seemed smart to provide aid to prevent communism at the time, it would be a decision the U.S. would later regret. After the war, Afghanistan was a damaged wreck led by warlords. One group of terrorists in Afghanistan was Al-Qaeda, which emerged from the Mujahideen. It was led by the infamous Osama bin Laden. Al-Qaeda was being supported by the ruling force of Taliban. American forces had angered Al-Qaeda by invading lands sacred to Muslims. Bin Laden gathered his followers and declared a jihad or holy war on Western civilization, namely the United States. The U.S. felt the wrath of Al-Qaeda when several commercial airlines were hijacked and flown into a landmark building in the United States. Several days after these attacks, President Bush gave a speech that addressed the suicide bombings and declared a war on terrorism. However, this war has mostly been fought by the Western countries against countries with Islamic civilizations.
Although Syed is correct that the primary cause of recent warfare have been political and economic disagreements, Huntington is also correct that the conflict has overwhelmingly been fought between countries with different civilizations. The Persian Gulf War and the Afghanistan War are two modern-day examples of political and religious wars fought between two different civilizations. The understanding helps us to predict conflicts and avoid them if possible in the future. With Samuel Huntington and Edward Said's philosophies, it is made abundantly clear that differences between civilizations are the main cause of modern warfare. Thank you, Ms. Gutchess.